On May 14, 2022, the world reeled with horror at the news of another mass shooting in the US.
10 killed, 3 injured after a mass shooting in a Buffalo supermarket.
Saturday shooting in Buffalo, New York.
The Buffalo mass shooting.
The shooter outlined his motivations in an unusually detailed 180-page manifesto.
In it, he wrote about the Great Replacement Theory.
The Great Replacement Theory.
Great Replacement Theory.
But he wasn't the first. The shooter in Pittsburgh, El Paso, and Poway, California, all mentioned this unfounded conspiracy. Its claims are now discussed in the US mainstream media.
The Biden administration has, from the very beginning, used immigration to change the demographic mix of our country.
And many Republican politicians have alluded to it.
Democrat politicians who have decided that they can't win re-election in 2022 unless they bring in a large number of new voters.
But this is not just a US phenomenon, quite the contrary.
Anders Breivik in Norway, the Christchurch, New Zealand, the shootings in Germany. It is absolutely the case that all of these shootings are related to the Great Replacement conspiracy theory.
Versions of the same trope have been spreading for decades.
This is age-old politics, right? This is nothing new.
They have become a staple of the global far right. And have found a home in European politics.
We have been talking about Great Replacement conspiracy theory for years.
Wendy has spent her career exposing and countering far-right conspiracies. She points out that the claims put out by this one are actually pretty simple.
So the Great Replacement, and I always say conspiracy theory, because it is not true, is the idea that white people are being purposefully replaced by non-white people.
It implies that their immigration is an orchestrated plan, that people of color are easily convinced to vote according to the preferences of shadowy elites, typically
Democrats, by Jews, by liberals in Europe.
And that this is destroying white people's lives.
Sweden, one of the places most drastically changed by recent immigration, is projected to become classified as a third world country.
The theory is delusional because there is no evidence of any secret plan. And racist because it considers non-white immigrants inferior. But its twisted logic points to a real transition.
We are having demographic changes. In the United States, we expect by 2050 for there to be a minority majority.
This is one reason why the conspiracy spreads so effectively in the US. But that's not where it comes from. Its tenets were first formulated in Europe.
This is nothing new.
Aurélien Mondon researches the mainstreaming of far-right ideas. He says that similar notions have been around for decades.
One of the kind of early thinkers in terms of race theory was the Comte de Gobineau from France. What was quite interesting in de Gobineau's theory is that he was incredibly pessimistic. For him, it was too late. For him, democracy in the 1850s had already completely destroyed the future by making people mixing with each other. And so the white race was already, on the way out.
This argument was then refashioned in the 1970s by far-right intellectuals in France,
who tried to rethink the discourse of the extreme right to make it more appealing to the mainstream. So they moved away from biological racism, the idea that the white race was superior to other races, for example. And instead, what they talked about was this form of cultural racism, which is, we're not talking about superiority, we're all equal, but we need to protect that equality and diversity in a way.
Europe is not only where these arguments first developed, but also where they were repackaged for the age of YouTube.
Generation Identity is a transnational white supremacist group. There are chapters all over the globe, but I will say that France and Germany are the two with the largest chapters. And I give them credit for helping to spread the replacement conspiracy theory. Back 6 and 7 years ago, they have these very slick videos where you have different young white people explaining how their lives are being ruined, how their countries are being ruined.
Nous sommes la génération de la fracture ethnique, de la faillite totale du vivre ensemble, du métissage imposé.
This rhetoric has seeped into European politics.
We've seen it in parts of Eastern Europe, we've seen it in Poland as well.
But the main example is Hungary.
öngyilkossági kísérletnek látom a nagy európai lakosságcsere programját, amely a hiányzó európai keresztény gyerekeket más civilizációból érkező felnőttekkel, migránsokkal akarja pótolni.
Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has used this conspiracy as a power-grabbing strategy. He characterizes his political opponents as part of a replacement conspiracy, and thus as a threat to national identity that must be silenced.
It plays a major part because it kind of creates a moral panic. It makes people scared that they might get replaced, even though that has no basis whatsoever. And as you said, in Hungary there's very little immigration, but when people are asked their perception of immigration, it is completely wildly wrong. But I think what we've seen happen is it also rising in Western Europe.
Many far-right party leaders have hinted at this conspiracy, including Eric Zemmour in France.
C'est un peuple étranger qui remplace un peuple français.
Geert Wilders in the Netherlands.
Daar is de autochtone bevolking nu al in de minderheid.
And Matteo Salvini in Italy.
A qualcuno servono schiavi a 3 euro all'ora che si sostituiscano agli italiani e ai siciliani.
But Aurélien Mondon says that more insidious references are just as dangerous, including arguments that present immigration as an invasion.
Invasione, pulizia etnica. Ormai è chiaro che è finanziata, è voluta, è organizzata.
Immigrants as criminals.
Van seksuele misdaden tot verkrachtingen tot diefstal.
And rescue boats as human trafficking.
Think about Fox News and Breitbart as well to some extent, which was the kind of even more extreme side of it. Think of CNews in France and Eric Zemmour. They don't necessarily want their politicians to win, but they want to change the discourse, and that's what really matters. What they wanted was not political power at first, they wanted cultural power.
This kind of language seeks to legitimize the same ideology and create fertile ground for the spread of the conspiracy.